There's a lot of LinkedIn articles that kind of say something as, hey, AI is going to be the death of consulting, and it's a pretty easy argument to make, and I think there's a lot of validity to it. I think a lot of the work that big consulting firms are doing that's repeatable, cookie cutter, let's put in some PowerPoint decks that gather dust in executives.
Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Notion in Practice podcast. Today we have Nick Tucker joining us, who does many things: strategy, culture change. He's a psychologist, he's an investor, he's a venture builder, but more importantly, he's a Notion power user.
It'd be great to have Nick on. He and I have worked together over the last 6 months, and he's really honed in on AI playbooks and workflows that have transformed his business. So keen to hear practically what that's done for him, but also I think he's going to have some insights about where AI is taking, especially consulting type businesses.
Awesome.
So it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself and, maybe tell us who you are, but also how you discovered Notion?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk to you guys. So who am I? So Nick Tucker. I run a business called Buoyant Partners. We're a boutique consulting firm. We work with a lot of big clients or companies across Australia. We're typically targeting some of their more ambiguous and complicated problems. Areas where we tend to play, we do a lot of work in the strategy and vision space, so helping businesses work out what's the theory that needs to be true for them to be successful in the future. And then we also think about, well, actually, how do you bring that to life? I would call that a culture problem, but that's really saying, well, if that's what we want to be, how do we actually start to really act and work in that way? How'd I come across Notion? I'd used it in a previous employer. So it was a funny one, actually. I'm probably not the person that people who implement technology into large businesses look at it and say, oh, I can't wait to work with Nick on this problem. I'm kind of the opposite, I suspect. And that's how I felt when I first came across Notion, until once I got in there and I realized, actually, if I can think it, I can build it.
Yeah.
And with a decent amount of, knowledge of how data works without being an expert in it, you can actually create stuff that's really cool. So essentially, when I started Buoyant Partners, I thought, hey, Notion's got to be the operating system. It's something that's got to be core to what we do. Certainly, it's been a cool journey so far, getting it all to work.
I love the if you think it, you can build it kind of idea. I feel like that's where we're at. It's not always that smooth, but it's emerging to be, if you're willing to push it and take yourself to a place that you're not particularly comfortable because you weren't a tech person before, I think you're right. Now you can put the Lego blocks together however you want, and then the AI piece makes it a huge step easier again. You're doing all kinds of things that we probably have no right to do.
Yeah. That's been good. And I was thinking about, well, what are some good examples of that? Used a lot of technology from like a HubSpot, Salesforce, those kind of pieces when I worked in big companies. And those were designed, I guess, to fit most people. Mm-hmm. But what I've found to be most useful is, well, how do I like to think about pipeline? How do I like to think about the way that you manage customer relationships, and then build a system that supports that way of working, and then also supports my team as well.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Nick, you mentioned you tackle very complex problems. I suspect that with large orgs you help create change with, there's a lot of moving parts. And so with Notion specifically, what has been a game changer for you recently?
Yeah, so it's quite a big question that I've been thinking about in preparation for this. I think the question from my point of view is, well, what role does it play in the business? We need to give it a better name, but it does feel like a second brain. But a second brain that's a little bit smarter than me, and also a second brain that maybe keeps its receipts and does the admin stuff really well. So I think there's this opportunity to say, well, how do you actually automate the work that you don't like doing? So for me, that's pretty much anything that's admin related. But also part of my model is partnering with people. So when someone comes on board to work with me, so you might have someone who's a deep expert in risk and compliance in regulated entities, right? How does that person come into the system utilize the buoyant methodologies, utilize the IP, all of the kind of the stuff that can now be automated to then kind of solve this as quickly and as painlessly as possible.
When you said, you started Buoyant Partners and this needs to be the operating system, what was the sort of the key problem that you were trying to solve with that? What was the, I guess, the deeper reason behind we need to use this to build the operating system?
Yeah, it's a good one. There's a lot of LinkedIn articles that kind of say something as, hey, AI is going to be the death of consulting, and it's a pretty easy argument to make, and I think there's a lot of validity to it. I think a lot of the work that big consulting firms are doing that's repeatable, cookie cutter, let's put in some PowerPoint decks that gather dust in executives, shelves, etc. I think that's true. I think that part of the model is dead. I think the thesis that I've been working on is, well, what do clients want? They want senior expertise. They want people who have done the job. Right? That, I guess, allows me to, and coming back to who am I partnering with, I'm partnering with experts in their field, right? I want to pay them really well and make sure that they feel really comfortable and supported to deliver good work. I think the question is the leverage model of consulting is really challenged. That associate, that 3 to 5 year level consultant that's kind of churning out data analysis and PowerPoint decks. Sure, Notion can't do that yet, but there's a whole bunch of automation in there that can at least remove some of that, right? So you say, okay, we can service client needs with great talent, supported by great technology in a way that delivers great outcomes and then also commercially makes sense from our perspective.
Yeah, that piece, I remember, as we were working together, these realizations that, hey, before a little while ago, I would have had to scour through all of this quite dense knowledge to try and pull out the key pieces. And you still have to be wise and insightful enough to know what's useful and what's not, right? You still have to have the strategic brain to understand that, thread has value and we should pull on that. But the ability to go and get the threads used to be this huge amount of work that junior consultants would do. And now you don't need them to do it anymore, right? You need to, the skill that you really need is, can I be wise enough to use the output of this, AI technology in a way that is kind of transformative? That to me feels like the biggest skill, because it can just generate endless possible, you say, I don't know, like looking at all this data, what are the top 5 things that, you could work on here to improve this business, as a really, really simple example. And it'll give you as many as you ask for. If you said 20, it'll give you 20, it doesn't mean they're all good, and so the skill is now in identifying what's useful.
Yeah, I think so. And there's certain parts. I think you got to be careful with automating too much of the problem solving. So I'll just kind of say that as a caveat, but just in case any of my clients are watching, I think you got to be careful with that. But then there's tasks that are laborious and take a lot of time and cost a lot of money but delivered limited value. So I'll give you an example. So often if you're coming into a new organization, you do something called a desktop review. Essentially that means you get a whole bunch of information from disparate sources across the client, and then you look into that, and depending on the problem you're solving, you might pull out those threads, as you say, Tim. So that's a task that maybe took 2 weeks, and you would charge a reasonable amount of money for a client to deliver that. And that would give you context. Now, that context can now pretty much be kind of sorted to a reasonable degree, right? So you're still spending time, but you're not spending as much time, which means we're instead of focusing client investment on the stuff that doesn't deliver value to them, we actually can spend that on the areas where we can unlock value. And I think that's the bit that's exciting, is you're not kind of stuck in the old way of working. You can say, okay, we get it. We can spend our time on the bits that matter.
Yeah. So Nick, I have a question based on the bits that matter. You are before you were a consultant, you're a psychologist, and I'm interested to see how much do you blend of both of those worlds? Are you a psychologist for your clients in the consulting world?
Yeah, so there's a specialty in psychology called organisational psychology. So that's what I did my training in. I did spend a little bit of time as what I call a real psychologist, so working with people with significant mental health issues. But for me, the driver became about how do you impact people on scale, right? So instead of me working one-to-one with somebody, how can I work with 1 to 100,000? To give you a data point on that, one thing I track is the amount of headcount that we've supported. And we're sitting up to 115,000 people in the last 9 months. And that is the scale that you can have, or the impact you can have from coming in and saying, hey, yeah, I'm probably more of a consultant and I'm a psychologist nowadays, but I can still apply that problem solving, that rigor, statistical analysis, scientific method, all those kind of good stuff, and have a broader impact. So that was the thing that kind of got me into that. It also, sometimes surprises people when the 6'5" guy with a beard actually is a psychologist, which I kind of enjoy, if I'm honest.
I had no idea you were 6'5".
Yeah, I know.
We must have talked like, always on a screen.
I've been told I've got a small presence on the screen. It happens all the time. They're like, oh man, you used to be, I just assumed you were really short. It's like, man, I got to get a bigger presence, really stand over the screen.
I think when we edit Jerwin, we just lift him up a little. So he's that, appropriately to scale taller than us, because both Jerwin and I are relatively short.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And, just for the guests that aren't really into the psychology world, what's the difference between, I guess, you mentioned real psychology versus organizational psychology?
Yeah. So, and I say that tongue in cheek again for anyone in the industry who's watching, and I'm not. I think there's a traditional view that people have, which is, okay, walk into a room, lie on a couch and talk about, my feelings.
Right.
And I'm being overly reductive and potentially going to add some ideas for humor. But that's kind of the picture that people paint. Mm-hmm. And you'd call that is your more traditional clinical psychology. Go in there, talk about things that are important, mental health. Obviously, these things are super critical today. Mm-hmm. Organizational psychology is more around applied psychology in the context of business and work. So if you think about the way a job's designed, the way that leaders lead, the way that you recruit the right people that fit and are smart enough to deliver what you need to deliver.
Yes.
What people would call traditional human resources, organizational development, which is more, hey, how do we position our business to drive our strategy? These are all areas that psychology has a role to play. Because I think fundamentally what we're looking for is a framework to make sense of what is infinitely complex. Mm-hmm. So humans, maybe you guys are a bit simple, but most humans are infinitely complex. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part of business is people. It's always the people stuff that people are truly frustrated about. So it's saying, well, how do we help people feel comfortable in that space and then apply our best logic to it?
Yeah. I'm interested to know, one of the things about this podcast is we'd sort of try and get into the practical realities of how this technology is kind of reshaping. I mean, I know Boy & Partners is not super old, but you've been doing this for a while. How has it sort of transformed your workflows? Like, you've had those models and methodologies across different technologies now. What's really changed for you?
Yeah, so I think there's four ways that it's changed in kind of a meaningful way. Number one's project management. So part of the work is you're working on multiple programs with multiple clients, with multiple partners. How do you have this source of truth? So that's kind of point one around project management. That instead of the old, I got my emails, I got my Google Drive or my SharePoint, half the time I don't know where anything is.
Yep.
So that's kind of point one. Point two that I found really interesting and useful is around tracking meetings and discussions. So like you guys, I talk to lots of people every day. I take huge amounts of notes. The challenge is, well, how do I kind of make sense of those? I should give you an example. This is the way I used to do it. So all through my office, I've got hundreds of these things. Right?
Oh my goodness!
So these books,
leather bound books.
Leather,
very
well,
nice.
Maybe not leather, maybe pleather. Maybe not that classy, Tim. But the you'd have all these conversations, and then you'd be like, "Oh, I remember that really interesting. I took notes, and I was present." And then you're like,
"Where is it?
Is it right?" I that's years, and they're all over this office. So I don't want to show you how messy it is, but that's super useful. Mm-hmm. I think there's also interesting use cases to that. Maybe you guys will appreciate, and this is a bit of a weird one, but as a business owner, how often do you get feedback about the quality of your conversations? That's a role for AI, right? To say, hey, I was just on this conversation with Tim and Jerwin. How well did I present, our core ideas and our products and services? And then because most people will say, oh, wow, that was great. You sounded comfortable and confident, but there's something about AI where it says, yeah, you were great at building rapport, but you know what? You didn't do so well on this, this, and this. Maybe think about X, Y, and Z in the future. Super useful, right?
Yeah.
Even if it isn't 100% accurate all the time, it is still on balance super useful. So that kind of idea of,
Yeah. We're sort of building a team in the agency. And so training people to do discovery calls, because it's kind of critical moment of meeting the client for the first time and having opportunity. Anyway, there's a skill to it. And, it sort of used to be that maybe you could coach someone, like maybe you could sort of watch their calls or sit with them, whatever, but it's hard to do that consistently. And so I realized, yes, you can ask AI, like, how did I do? But you can also build like a rubric, you can build the model to say, this is what an ideal one looks like. And I got it to help me build that by taking some calls that I was like, I saw those calls, they went really well. Let's assess those, pull out what are the, the key things. And now I've got it running. So every time I run a discovery call, it runs this sort of analysis of it. And then every single time. So I can look back without even thinking about it. And it's not like, I'm going to do a review or I'm going to get some feedback, which was always like a massive thing. Now it's just a part of the process. And you can track it over time. And the fact that it can just happen in the background without you having to stop and, choose to do it. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I suspect, I don't have the hard stats on this, but I suspect it's easier to get feedback from a machine than it is for me to sit down with the very intimidating Tim Jeffries and get feedback on how well I'm doing discovery calls, right? That's a big challenge, and that's a big problem that organizations have, is that I think most people want to come to work and do a good job. Most people want to get better. But when people turn up and say, hey, I've got some feedback for you, and everyone goes, oh, shit, and they shut down in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Two other ways to come back to your question, Tim, around workflows and areas that have really helped. One's kind of pipeline and commercial management of the business. So you think about taking a pipeline that's useful, holding yourself to account, making sure that you're collecting and collating the conversations and interactions through that pipeline. Incredibly useful. Again, and you've seen it, but this is my version of it, but it's useful, right, on balance. Also starting to think about things like, what are certain metrics that you might want to track to hold yourself to account, which is really cool. Other one that I've done, because I always go through this like cycle of, oh, things are going really well, oh man, everything's a disaster. Things are going really well, oh, everything's a disaster, right? So it's quite nice, and I'm pretty sure the AI is biased towards me, but I'm like, how's the business? And they're like, yeah, it's good, and you could work on this. But it's nice to just, have that kind of, that a boy, good boy. All right, cool.
Yeah.
It's going all right, which is
pump up the tires.
Pump up the tires. And then the fourth one, which is a big deal in my space, is IP management. So you think about common thing you might be doing is spending time interviewing a bunch of leaders. So Notion's really effective at keeping those, we call them interview guides or discussion documents, in one place, so that you can then say, hey, we're about to start this and we're solving this problem. Use all of the knowledge of that to draft a discussion guide for me. Awesome. I then go and do the last 20, 30%, and then it goes to the client. 1 hour task, 15 minutes. So again, there's opportunities for leverage there, which is great.
And it's so thorough, like I would like to think that I have sort of moments where I, really plumb the depths of something and understand it. But if I'm honest, they're few and far between. Whereas this thing, maybe it doesn't always kind of get to that same level as I might in a moment, of unusual greatness. But that 80% is all day, every time I ask it to do something. And so I'm finding the thoroughness of it is, quite profound. It's like, it's a really great team member.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So, I mean, your world, are you seeing transformation in other consulting practices that are kind of like yours? Are people taking advantage of it, or is it still too new?
No, I'd say most people are using it to some extent. I do think every organization that I've chatted to has seen the opportunity with AI. There's probably a human problem in there that's yet to be solved, which is around adoption. I'll give you a kind of funny anecdote. Old colleague of mine called me up and said, oh, I've got this great business idea. Do you mind if I interview you so that I can create a bot that replaces management consultants? And I was like, absolutely not.
Oh my gosh.
But like I respect the boldness of asking that
Yeah, the
question,
hustle. Yeah.
But I think there is that fear of, well, hey, are we actually putting people out of a job? I must admit, 6 months ago, I thought, yeah, that's a very real possibility. I'm less bullish on it. Not as close to the actual development of the tools, but there seems to be this common story that's coming through with CEO or someone senior says, hey, there's a 30% cost efficiency / opportunity in our business. Most managers are pretty well tuned to cost out and say, okay, cool. How do I automate? How do I remove those kind of fixed costs in the business? Then they deploy these tools. Less than 50% of people utilize them. Tool doesn't really get very smart. There's a whole bunch of restrictions and data security and all of that kind of stuff, as there should be. And then they're kind of stuck with an expensive AI tool and the same level of cost from a headcount point of view. I do think the probably the biggest problem is adoption, and how do we get people excited to go in there? And I'll make a tenuous link back to Notion, but I think part of the value there is, well, how do you, if you're creating it for you and the way that you work and makes your life easier, I think if you do that across 100,000 people, you're going to deliver value to the business, but you're also going to make people's lives better.
Yeah. Yeah. The change management piece is still the hardest bit when I think about consulting. Like, it's not usually the technical problems that are the hardest. Yes, okay, we've solved the right problem in the right way, but then how do we actually get people to really own it and use it? That was the problem before AI, and with AI, it seems to be the same problem. It's the damn humans.
It's the damn humans, which is what you guys are trying to replace. But
we really aren't. We really aren't. Yeah. Going back to the IP piece, one of the things, when I first started using AI a lot, I was really obsessive about it understanding the client, like having enough context about them, who they are and what the project is. And, the meeting notes were really useful. And then I realized, hang on, the AI is, these LLMs are trained on like a wealth of knowledge. So if you ask it about any topic, it'll have some ideas about it, but they're not your ideas. They're just the generic ideas that come from its training, and it will apply its intelligence to their situation. But more recently, I've realized that, I have a bunch of models, ways of thinking, IP about how we do what we do. And if I can train the AI, and when I say train, I mean, have the AI hold that as context, then when I'm talking to it about a client call that I've just had, it is starting to be one of our team because it's using our models and it's using our framework. Have you kind of pushed into that with any of your stuff yet?
Yeah. So I have a very specific way of writing emails. There's a very kind of basic example that's probably laughable to you guys, but I have a very specific way, very kind of direct tone, the way I structure it, these kind of things. It's been super effective in helping me kind of replicate that structure. So that's a useful piece. Your comment around context, I think, is really important. Like, you think of any strategic problem, context is actually entirely critical, right? So it's very hard to, a common brief I might get is, hey, can you do a review around the culture of the organization? Can you tell us what's helping or hindering us to be able to deliver on our strategic aspiration? In that environment, context is key, because there is no such thing as a good or bad culture. It is just contextual. And the kind of more heavy-handed example I give is, if you are a real estate agent in the eastern suburbs, the purpose of your organization is to sell as many expensive houses as possible, right? And again, I'm being overly reductive to make a point. And then you say, okay, so what type of culture do we need to deliver that outcome? Well, you need a very, very strong sales culture.
Yeah.
And then you think, okay, great, cool, that makes sense. How do you create that? Now, one of the systems that you might put in place is you put in place 0% base salary, 100% commission. So you got very high commission, very, very low. So if you don't sell houses, you don't get paid. That drives a very certain type of behavior that isn't for everybody, but it creates an environment where the right individual can actually be super successful and deliver and grow the business. So you apply that logic and you say, well, context is so, so important. So the question of, well, how do you take that context and then apply it in the way you're interacting with your AI, that needs to be critical. There is an element of wisdom there. to say, hey, let's get down to brass tacks. What are we actually trying to get here? And I think, at least in the next 3 to 5 years, I think there's still space for a human to do that, to understand it, to empathize, to see through the complexity. Yeah, to your point, Tim, I think that the context is super duper important.
So, Nick, jumping into the context piece, how much from putting a psychologist hat, how much prompting goes into building these contexts for your clients? Do you prompt a lot per client, or is it sort of you just come in post-call and then you use your tacit knowledge to come in and expertise and then sort of have a conversation with your AI?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the tacit knowledge point is a good one.
Yes.
I think there's a bunch of AI will be very good at that explicit knowledge. So that's the more procedural stuff that how do I build a deck? Here are the steps.
Yes.
I can see a deck out my window. It's the first thing came to mind. So the implicit knowledge is more saying how would Buoyant Partners go about solving this problem? And then the tacit is, well, how do I bring all of my experience together to actually apply different contexts? And that's where AI is a great thinking partner, right?
Yeah.
And at a question, I was talking to one of my colleagues last night, and he was pulling together an idea, and he said, I'm concerned that this is the way I've always done it. So can you please challenge it? And that's where having a thinking partner there who is unbiased, but can bring that strong procedural knowledge. I think that's super valuable. And that's very much how do we maximize our capability, where I can say, yes, no, have you thought about this? I don't like that bit. I think you misunderstood. And you can have that in a really meaningful way. Like it's kind of a dream come true 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally. The thinking partner bit is really interesting. Like it's kind of because it's AI, but it's also just, we need thinking partners, or maybe not all of us, but I need a thinking partner. I can't do a lot of that just in my own head. And so having something that's intelligent, that's always available and can be directed to play that role, that back and forth role, and can push me and prompt me. And I've started playing with, the sort of custom instructions. I put this new instruction in there that says, if Tim's thinking about something, he's not directing you to do something. It's not a task. He's not a research, whatever. But if he's thinking about something, pick from one of these mental models. So, sort of put a bunch of mental models, some frameworks for thinking that I would like to use, but I use inconsistently, and like pull that mental model out and then use that to help him think through something. So if he's trying to make a decision, grab this framework and like walk him through it so that he actually does it in a way that I wish I did myself, but I don't. And that's been really, really interesting because it's helping me think in ways that I would like to, rather than the output of it. It's not so much like it's generating all these amazing ideas or it's, making me choose the right option, but it's pushing the thinking in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. I think everyone who's ever worked with me will roll their eyes on this comment that there's a methodology that I use all the time called the pyramid principle, or people call it Minto. And here we go, another prop. It's a very dry book about logic and problem solving and how to structure your thinking. It's a technique I use all the time. Apply this methodology to what we've discussed today, and just a way of structuring and just evolving your thoughts. It's super powerful. Again, doesn't nail it, doesn't get it perfect, but helps the boat go faster. So I'm up for it. Yeah.
I always love asking people, like, what have they been surprised by? Can be good, can be bad. It's usually funnier if it's bad. But, in the journey of experimenting, it's important that we don't forget that all this is kind of brand new. We're at the beginning.
Yeah.
Half the time it just doesn't work at all. We're talking about it like it's revolutionary, and some days it is, and then the next day it makes a colossal mistake. Yeah. What have you bumped into on the journey?
I have sometimes feels like when you're chatting to the AI that you've got, 22-year-old graduate that's working with you that had a few too many beers on the weekend. Like some days it's brilliant and you're like, far out, I could run a, $70 billion business using this technology. And the next day you're like, mate, what is going on? Like, go home, have a nap, drink some water, and then come back to me, right? So yeah, I think that surprised me. And it probably speaks to a risk in all of this technology. Is one of the things that I do worry about with Notion, and I know I've spoken to you about this, Tim, is if they decide to change, on Saturday or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, and all of the system that you built disappears.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that wouldn't happen, but coming back to that hangover comment, they release a new model, and then suddenly you're like, mate, who is this? I've now got a hungover graduate working for me.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
That comment.
Yeah, I
story.
switch between the models a bit.
Yeah.
It seems to be just, Ward's having a bad day. See if Gemini's any better.
I get it. Yeah, exactly. Mondays are tough, even for AI.
Very good. Nice. So the next steps for you, where does it go from here? What's the sort of next problem to try and solve?
Yeah, for me, it's about, I was thinking about this. It's almost like going to the gym, right? So you go to the gym, you test out new things, and over time you get stronger and stronger and fitter and healthier.
Yes.
That's kind of where I feel like I'm at now. I've done the initial setup, I've done the initial structuring, I've turned it into something that I think's useful. It's now time to apply it and just keep learning for it, keep getting stronger. So that's really the focus for me, is particularly as we grow and bring in interesting and new client problems and different partners, how does the system continue to get smarter and better? Because back to your context comment, the more context we give it, the smarter it's going to get, the closer it's going to kind of replicate the type of thinking that I want it to. So it's just about hitting the gym.
Get the reps in.
That's it. Nice.
Have you got custom agents yet?
No. But as soon as I do, you're my first call, Tim.
It is. They seem to be just like drip feeding out to the world. So one day I'll rock up in a client's workspace and there they are. And
okay.
The client's on the other end of the call with a big smile saying,
"I'd love them."
Actually, we know when they release now. It's in the week of the Feb 20th something. I don't know exactly when, but by the time this episode comes out, hopefully.
We'll see. I never believe the dates. The dates get pushed.
They always move.
It's on the roadmap, Tim.
Something will go wrong. All right. Yeah. Cool. Well, mate, thank you so much. Really interesting to hear it, from your world and your perspective on those things. It's been fun to share the journey. I look forward to
just like learning so much.
Yeah, I love a good metaphor too.
We need them. Feel a bit lost without them. I'm making them up on the fly all too often. I probably need to sit with AI and work out what the appropriate metaphor is and then stick to one rather than just pulling them out of thin air.
I did think of that this morning. Do I type in how to sound smart on a podcast about Notion? I didn't know. I held back, I thought you'd prefer a human.
Very much so. Cool, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Gents, appreciate it.
Catch you soon.
Have a good day.
Cheers.
Thank you.
You too. Bye. All right. So, Jerwin, takeaways. I think there's heaps in there actually, but probably the most interesting one for me at the moment is the AI as a thinking partner. I think a lot of the focus up to this point has been about AI doing things for you, like doing tasks, and a lot of Notion's kind of promo and my thinking to this point has been, hey, this is a great sort of worker in the business. You can use AI as an employee, it can do the work for you, and that's true. And also there's the generative component. AI can, create things for you. But Nick's comments around using AI as a thinking partner and that sort of pyramid model that he was talking about, obviously, that's a framework that he uses all the time to be able to rely on the AI to sort of help him use that framework and think in the right ways. I think there's lots for us to explore in there, and different industries need different kinds of, thinking, persuasion or perspectives. We could be leveraging AI to do that a whole lot more. So that was fascinating to me. I'm looking forward to playing with that idea.
Yeah, I'm just thinking all of the great frameworks of all the amazing books that I've read, and there's so many good principles, frameworks across academia and across industry. And now it's sort of like, how can we use this to augment our thinking? And to jump on your key learning, I'll take it with my beautiful AI thinking partner, but to the point where I'll give him a hat where he's a coach. And so a key takeaway that resonated with me is like a feedback and coaching tool. So after every meeting, it is that human bias of like, hey, how did I do? Like, for example, when I was at the Sydney event yesterday, it's like, how was it? Everyone's always, even if they're best friends or like you don't know them, they're not going to tell you what went wrong. They're like, yeah, it went well. I really loved it. But there's always these things of like issues that popped up that it's a blind spot to you. And AI is so good at doing that it can ask you like, hey, how did I do? What did I do wrong? And Nick talking about having those custom rubrics to like analyze his calls and give himself that feedback is super critical. Like it's that reflection, like to improve for the next call, but then also give him that feedback. And then I think I might imagine over time you can then improve your blind spots where you wouldn't have been able to do that. Like unless you had your friend sitting next to you on a call, or I had you, Tim, just listening to my words or my specific things. But then you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. The third one for me is like a follow on from that. His comments about AI being less threatening, like getting feedback from AI being less threatening. I think, if you've been around for a while, you would love to get better feedback. You would love to get like consistent feedback from teammates and bosses and whatever, but it's really hard to get it. One, it's hard for us, like we find it threatening, but also people find giving that feedback threatening. There's dynamics in the relationship that you don't want to mess with. So I think, that's a really interesting one, and like a great episode, a great like guest, and he's obviously deep in a whole bunch of businesses, kind of challenges and problems. So yeah, I loved the chance to chat with him about that. Hopefully everyone at home did too. Hopefully it's the kind of thing that really stirs people's thinking. So keen to hear the feedback on this one.
Yeah. Okay, so Tim had to go. But the gift of this episode is, drum roll, we are going to make a playbook based on the conversation that you can access on Notion Marketplace. The link will be below. And if you do have any feedback, I want to give a shout out to everyone I met at the Sydney event yesterday. Thank you for supporting this podcast. It's so surreal to have you all just, give feedback, of course, of the podcast too. We'll be doing more tech demos. It's XYZ. But yeah, thanks for supporting us on this journey. As you can see, I've started to really invest more time into this podcast with Tim. You see his background's been renovated. We didn't get to chat about that. But yeah, it's been awesome. If you can support the channel, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. And then on Spotify, you know the drill. But hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you in the next one.